Now I want to make one thing very clear going into this video. GW deserves quite a bit of the hate that it gets. I mean, my last video was all about them killing a franchise that was stagnating and failing to bring in profits, in part because they never did anything with it. That's before we get into their BS with the animators, their prices, and well, a lot. But even if only to throw it in that much starker contrast for when they do screw the pooch, sometimes I think it's appropriate to look at the positives of GW. Believe it or not, they aren't run by Satan and do occasionally do something right. You should still give them all of the crap they deserve, but the flip side of that is acknowledgement of when they do something right. I'm aware I'm a Warhammer channel and therefore bitching and moaning are physical necessities to myself and my audience, but maybe we put down the Book of Grudges for just a bit to look at some stuff they've actually done quite well. I also should make it clear that I'm in no way sponsored by GW for this. I just thought that the constant bitching about the company gets a bit old, as deserved as it often is. So let's try and have an open mind, yeah? But first, it's once again time to talk about Raid Shadow Legends, baby! The game with over 600 heroes is once again back, but you should know by now that they have millions of hero combinations to make. I know I've told you that before, and if you forget, I'm gonna be real damn upset. Instead, let's talk about the bosses, because they're nearly as varied as the heroes. More specifically, this guy, the Minotaur. Minotaurs are cool in whatever setting they're in, and Raid is no exception. If you need an explanation for why Minotaurs are awesome, just go read some Greek mythology. Some bosses are all about debuffing you and setting up the perfect situation to hit your team at its weakest, and the Minotaur is not one of them. He's just gonna bull rush you like a runaway freight train. Subtlety isn't his strong suit, which is irrelevant because he doesn't need it. Bring your strongest heroes to this fight. I recommend some champions to stack buffs because the Minotaur is pretty much unmatched when it comes to brute force. I mean, look at it. Would you try and arm wrestle him? He's a bull man the size of a house. Feel free to try your luck and let me know how it goes once you've been released from the hospital. Beyond the Minotaur and plenty of other bosses, there's a lot happening this month. 5 new kick-ass looking champions are on their way, the champion vault is being overhauled, as well as a whole load of small updates to make the game that much better. And of course, a summer splash event where you can get some beautiful looking skins for the dwarf champion Trunda. Can I just say it's genuinely cool to see a woman dwarf getting the limelight? I mean, how often do you see that kind of thing? Of course there's more. There's always more, you fool. Log in just 7 times between now and July 28th and you get a free high elf legendary champion, Deliana. She's one of the best support champions in the game and you get her by turning the game on 7 times. You can't come up with a better deal than that. I mean, she's free and available to old and new players. If the idea of a free S-tier elf champion isn't at least a little appealing to you, then you need to get your head checked, my friend. Yes, I'm biased because she's an elf and I don't care. Start unlocking her right now. And if you're a new player and use the code MyDeliana, which is on screen in front of your face right now, you get 50 XP brews and a ton of silver to max her out to level 50 straight away. The best time to get raid, you ask? Right this very moment. Because I once again have an amazing offer for you. I had to pull some strings and sell some organs, but that's okay. I gave them my pancreas, which if you couldn't tell from the channel name and my constant references to it, doesn't work, so I think we came out on top here. If you click the link in the description or use the QR code directly in front of your face at this very moment, you get $30 worth of bonuses for free. Once again, you get more free things. You get the epic champion, Ana, however you say it, it doesn't matter, as well as 200,000 silver, an energy refill, 1 XP boost, and an ancient shard for another great hero right away. It'll be right here in the inbox. Once more for the people in the back, that's right here in the inbox, next to the giant finger I've plastered on the screen. All this will be waiting for you in-game, so download Raid now and I'll see you there. Alright, now on to Games Workshop. Now let's start with something real simple. Games Workshop does have a bit of a sense of humor about themselves. Now you might just say that this is all corporate speak to make you think kinder thoughts about the company, to which I'd say, yeah, probably. But seeing some of the stuff they put out shows that at the very least, they aren't all soulless robots. For example, let's take a look at the 500 facts thing they posted when they opened their 500th store worldwide. Fact number 177, Arkan Land... Thank you, Pump. 177. Arkan Land discovered the land speeder. See, it's not named the land speeder because it speeds over the land, it's because some guy named Land invented it. That's just silly. But then move on to fact number 178. Plastic glue is named after Sir Henry Plastic. Like I said, they've got a sense of humor about themselves. Or maybe take this other one they made. Every time there's a leak, we push back the squat codex a year. Which, all jokes aside, that is retroactively incredibly funny to see. On its own, this admittedly isn't exactly groundbreaking work in the field of consumer friendliness, but try to imagine, say, EA doing this. Every time you complain about loot boxes, we add a single cent to the cost of a FIFA pack. I mean, for God's sake, look at the Stormcast meme. This isn't fan-made, Games Workshop themselves made it. You can say that it's just corporate pandering, and to some extent it probably is, but it also shows that they're at least somewhat aware of their own shortcomings. They're at least somewhat in the know that sometimes what they do is, a little bit silly, a little bit goofy. They aren't entirely a company of blind idiots flying through the business by the seat of their pants. Now for some actual stuff, Games Workshop will bend over backwards to replace a model that comes with some kind of error. They will go out of their way to fix that issue, to the point that you'll just get another model for free on top of the one you have for the smallest defect. Someone left a comment on a video of mine saying that his Call of Franz miniature had a small part missing for Deathclaw's harness. They sent him another one. Same thing happened the second time, so they sent him another one. This time all was well and good though. Key thing is, however, they didn't ask for the first two back. Dude basically got 3 free models for one because of the slightest of errors. That kind of actual consumer friendliness doesn't come often. It's not 100% equal comparison, but the first thing that comes to my mind related to this is when Bethesda just started refusing refunds for Fallout 76, lying about several of the pre-order / limited edition products, and generally making themselves the clowns of the gaming industry. Games Workshop could be a whole lot worse when it comes to this kind of stuff. Believe it or not, Games Workshop is also responsible for the tabletop wargaming world being what it is today. Whether or not you want to admit it, Warhammer is the face of the tabletop gaming industry, for wargames at least. It's pretty much the only one anyone outside of the hobby might recognize at a glance. Warpath by Mantic might have some cool models, but it isn't even comparable to the juggernaut of business that is 40k, which I know saying that is going to upset at least one person that's watching this, but hey, at least I gave it a shout out, right, Hatefield? Now this, in turn, has led to the industry growing a lot, and I don't just mean more people coming into the hobby. Warhammer does cause that because it's interesting and people want to get into the cool mini thing, but GW's growth means that the industry as a whole grows, and as people look into it beyond just Games Workshop, they find that, holy crap, there's a whole load of these kinds of games. Personal example, I wouldn't have ever heard about Kings of War or Flames of War had I not gotten into wargaming through GW. Well, admittedly, I haven't purchased models for them yet. That's mostly because I just have such a pile of shame of unassembled and unpainted minis already. I don't want to double down on more to sit in a cabinet for a year collecting dust. I fully plan on getting some of their models eventually, and I doubt I'm the only person like this. Warhammer is a jumping off point for people to get into the rest of the industry, and while Warhammer's popularity does certainly take away from the attention of the others, at the same time, people are aware that this world of gaming exists often solely because of Warhammer and GW. From what I've read, they also aren't the worst company to work for by far. I spoke with someone who previously worked at a Games Workshop, and he said that especially in recent years, Games Workshop creates a very positive workspace for its employees. Wages and benefits even at the lower end of the corporate food chain are respectable, and it's overall just plain and simple not a bad company to work for. I mean, my local GW has 2 managers, and almost every time I walk into the shop and it isn't obscenely busy, I see one of them painting a mini. I can't imagine that if they hated the company, they'd be working there, let alone buying and playing with the damn products that it makes. Games Workshop also gives a very wide variety of products to choose from. Now, let's not kid ourselves here. Warhammer in many ways is very unoriginal to say the least. Just look at my precious Eldar. Did you know that the very word Eldar comes from Tolkien? I don't mean they took a word and changed it around a bit. It's literally ripped straight from Lord of the Rings. It even means people of the stars. But at the same time, I cannot think of a better representation of the idea of a spaceborne elf than the various types of Eldar. And even in that very specific field of models, there's plenty of options to choose from. Same goes for the high elves of Warhammer Fantasy if you want a more direct ripoff. And even if you don't want to choose from one of those because you're one of those people that thinks hating elves is a personality trait, there's still more than enough options to choose from. Space Marines, Tyranids, Ogres, Tree People, Rat People. If it fits a sci-fi or fantasy trope, Games Workshop has something for it. Speaking of Lord of the Rings, they make a game for that, so if you hate how GW has portrayed Tolkien's work in their own, you can also use Games Workshop to go straight to the source. As a related aside, I know that pretty much everyone who plays 40k, but not specifically Space Marines, complains about how limited the model selection is, myself included, I'll admit. That's fair, but it's important to remember that it's limited in comparison to the Marines. In a vacuum, just about every army has an absolute load of variety, because even when they're ignoring an army, Games Workshop makes sure that there's enough choices to be had that you can always get something just a little bit new. Their treatment of the universes they create is also above and beyond what it probably needs to be. Now, I just got done complaining about the end times, so I'm not going to try and pretend that everything they do is good. In fact, I'd wager most of it is mediocre to bad. But Warhammer Fantasy has dozens of books to its name, and the setting is dead. And yes, I'm aware the old world is coming, but it's not out yet, so it's still dead. The same thing goes for the Horus Heresy, and that's not even 40k proper. It's a damn prequel series to the main game. Every faction has novels worth of lore to it, and while there's obviously favorites, GW didn't have to do any of this. They could just release a few models and be done with the matter, especially given how popular they are now. But instead, every faction has top-tier art design and at least a few books about them to keep you entertained, and they keep putting these things out. Games Workshop also gives the Warhammer license to pretty much anyone that knows how to turn on a computer so they can make a game with it. Now, this is admittedly a mixed bag. I mean, how many Warhammer games out there that are just plain awful? But it also means we get gems like the Total Warhammer games, Space Marine, and Mechanicus. None of these things would be around if GW wasn't willing to share the license of their product, and I think they really deserve some props for this. They've also been putting a lot more work into their specialist games. Kill Team is almost its own thing now rather than just being 40k but smaller. I see Aeronautica Imperialis boxes in my local GW, which is a whole new way to experience a 40k battle, and Age of Sigmar has several small games to keep you interested with. I mean, there's even an Age of Sigmar version of the game Munchkin. As an aside, play Munchkin if you really want to see how much of a Skaven your friends really are. They've really put in the effort to make Warhammer more than just, well, Warhammer. Now there's plenty of options of how to play it. Let's not even get into the Horus Heresy or the upcoming Old World games that allow you to experience never-before-seen parts of the setting. Games Workshop is all about options to spend your money on, baby. Speaking of, last point I want to make is their pricing. If by this point you haven't written me off as a company shill, then you probably are now, but hear me out. Warhammer pricing is abominable for what you need to play the game, and for certain things, there's no reason at all they need to be as expensive as they are. A single pot of paint does not need to be as much as a McDonald's meal. A Titan does not need to cost as much as a utility bill. I am not, and I will never defend those things. But let's look at the Skaven clan rat. 20 minis for $42. That's just over $2 American per miniature. Honestly, not bad. Storm Vermin brings that up to $3 a mini, which is still very good. How about the Marine Poster Boys? $60 for 10 Primaris Intercessors, which brings us up to $6 a mini. A lot of what's wrong with Games Workshop's pricing is that buying any of these individually is worth nothing in terms of army building. Especially for certain armies like the Guard, you need to buy a lot of those $60+ kits to make a functioning army. But speaking solely in terms of collecting cool miniatures, it's really not that bad. If you just want to grab a box of Town Guards to be represented by some Empire Spearmen from GW, that's not a bad investment. Yes, you need glue and clippers to assemble them, but even with those things on top, it still isn't horrible. Like I said at the beginning, I'm not trying to defend GW's various atrocities. For every good thing they do, there's at least one bad thing. But it's important to remember that they do good work, whether or not it's immediately obvious. If you only ever complain, then the complaints become meaningless background noise and Games Workshop won't listen. When you see them do something good and support it, they're more likely to do that something again. Hope this was a nice change of pace for you. I'll be back to your regularly scheduled complaining about GW soon enough, don't you worry. As always, thank you to my channel members. You are the start collecting kit to my Games Workshop, allowing me to fund more creations to come. Sometime within the next few weeks will be the 50k subs Q&A. I still have to film with my friends and I have no idea how long editing something like that'll take. Could take 5 minutes, could take days. Who knows? As for what I can solidly schedule out, next video will be Age of Sigmar with maybe a fantasy lore video as well after that. Still debating on it. After that, we're back to 40k, with maybe a little something else thrown into the mix with it. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to subscribe or become a member. Either way, thank you for watching and take care out there. And of course, the best thing Games Workshop has ever done is this article thanking Ronald Reagan for fixing the price of the dollar. Because when I think of the economics of the 1980s and the general state of the world at that point in history, the first thing I think of is how many toy army soldiers are people gonna buy. Why did they do this? Did they think he was going to give a shout out to some random tabletop gaming company in England? And why did they decide to have him shake hands with the single ugliest dwarf I've ever seen in my life? Look at his face. Look at it. Who the hell greenlit this? If anyone ever needs to turn in a college report on the effects of Reaganomics, just send him this picture. Don't do anything else. Don't write out the essay. Just give him this.